The massive alien warship Crimson Talon floated silently in the darkness of space, its hull gleaming like blood under the distant stars. Inside the command center, dozens of reptilian creatures gathered around a circular table that pulsed with holographic displays. These were the Vorthak, conquerors of 17 star systems, and today they faced something that puzzled them greatly. Admiral Torval stood at the head of the table, his scales shifting from deep green to angry red as he listened to the same message for what felt like the 100th time. The transmission crackled through the speakers in a strange alien language they had learned to call human speech. The words were always the same. "Leave our space immediately. This is your final warning." The other Vorthak officers hissed with amusement. Commander Zekthor, a battle-scarred veteran, slammed his clawed fist on the table. "Admiral, this is ridiculous. We've been receiving these pathetic threats for 3 whole months now. When do we stop playing games with these primitive creatures?" Torval's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic display of Earth's solar system. The small blue planet hung there like a jewel, seemingly defenseless and ripe for conquest. His scouts had been watching this system for months, taking detailed scans and measurements. Their reports were always the same boring story. "Tell me again what our reconnaissance teams found," Torval commanded, though he already knew the answer by heart. Lieutenant Vashka stepped forward, her voice filled with confidence. "Admiral, the humans are barely capable of reaching their own moon. They use primitive chemical rockets that take days to travel distances our ships cover in minutes. Their largest orbital stations house maybe a few hundred individuals. We detected no weapons capable of threatening even our smallest patrol craft." Another officer, Captain Mordek, added with a dismissive wave of his hand, "Their technology is at least 500 years behind ours. They've only recently begun mining asteroids, and their energy production is still based on burning fossil fuels on their planet's surface. It's almost sad, really." The laughter that filled the command center was harsh and predatory. These Vorthak had conquered species far more advanced than what they saw around Earth. They had faced plasma cannons, energy shields, and faster-than-light combat vessels. The humans seemed to have none of these things. Torvald pulled up another display showing his own fleet. 8,000 warships of various sizes filled the screen, from massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets to swift attack craft that could outrun anything in known space. Each ship carried enough firepower to level entire cities. Together, they represented the might of an empire that had never known defeat. "Perhaps," Torval mused, his voice dripping with contempt, "these humans have watched too many of their own entertainment broadcasts about space battles. They seem to think warnings and threats will save them from their fate." The reptilian admiral made his decision with the casual certainty of someone who had done this many times before. His voice boomed across the command center as he gave the order that would change everything. "Signal all ships. We advance toward the human homeworld immediately. It's time to add another conquest to our empire's glorious history." As the Crimson Talon and its massive fleet began moving toward Earth, none of the Vorthak realized they were making the biggest mistake of their lives. Admiral Torval settled into his command chair with the satisfaction of someone who had done this ritual many times before. The ritual was always the same across every conquered world. Send the surrender demand, wait for the inevitable panic and pleading, then proceed with the invasion. It was almost boring in its predictability. He activated the long-range communications. Narration began broadcasting on all frequencies toward the small blue planet. His voice carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Inhabitants of the 3rd planet, you will surrender immediately and prepare for occupation by the Vorthak Empire. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. You have 12 of your planetary rotations to respond with your unconditional surrender. This is not a negotiation." The transmission ended, and Torval leaned back in his chair. Around him, his officers went about their duties with practiced efficiency. In his experience, most species took at least a full day to respond, usually with desperate attempts to negotiate or buy time. Some tried to hide, others begged for mercy, and a few foolishly attempted to fight back. None of it ever mattered. But The humans surprised him. The response came back in just 4 hours. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human male sitting calmly behind what appeared to be a simple metal desk. The creature looked unremarkable by Vorthak standards. No natural armor, no visible weapons, no intimidating features whatsoever. He wore a plain blue uniform with strange symbols that meant nothing to the alien observers. "I am Admiral Kim Jiho, of the United Earth Defense Command," the human said in a steady voice that showed no trace of fear or panic. "We have received your transmission, and I must repeat our previous warning. Leave our solar system immediately. This is your final opportunity to do so peacefully." The Vorthak officers burst into laughter. Commander Zekthor slapped his knee with amusement. "Look at this tiny creature. It thinks it can give us orders." But Admiral Kim wasn't finished speaking. What he said next drained all the laughter from the alien command center. "To demonstrate that we are aware of your presence, I will now provide the exact coordinates of your fleet." The human began reading off numbers with mechanical precision. "Your flagship, Crimson Talon, is currently positioned at coordinates 127.4 by 89.2 by 34.7, bearing 045 degrees. Your second command vessel, Death's Edge, is at coordinates 201.8 by 156.3 by 67.1. Torval felt his blood turn cold as the human continued listing position after position, each one perfectly accurate. But the real shock came when Admiral Kim began rattling off technical specifications. "Your ships are currently running standard Vorthak stealth protocols. Frequency range 2847.3 to 2851.7 terahertz. Your shield generators are operating at 73% capacity, and your main weapons are charging, but not yet at full power." The alien command center fell completely silent. This was impossible. Vorthak cloaking technology was the most advanced in the known galaxy. No species had ever been able to detect their ships when stealth systems were active, let alone provide exact technical readouts of their equipment. Lieutenant Vashka's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Admiral, how could they possibly know all of this? Our ships are completely invisible to any known scanning technology." On the screen, Admiral Kim leaned forward slightly, and for the first time, there was something that might have been a smile on his face. But somehow that smile was more terrifying than any battle cry or threat. "We know you're there, Admiral Torval. We've been watching you since you entered our space 3 days ago. Turn back now. This is your last warning." The transmission ended, leaving the Vorthak staring at a blank screen in stunned silence. The red planet Mars grew larger on the main viewing screen as the Vorthak fleet moved deeper into the human solar system. Admiral Torval stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the alien world slide past his ships like a silent witness to what was about to unfold. His 8,000 vessels moved in perfect formation, their engines creating a symphony of power that had terrified countless civilizations before. Yet something felt wrong. In all his years of conquest, Torval had never encountered silence like this. Usually by now there would be frantic radio chatter from the target species, desperate calls for help, panicked military communications, civilian broadcasts filled with terror and confusion. But from Earth and its surrounding space, there was nothing but an eerie quiet that seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. "Status report," Torval commanded, his voice cutting through the tension that had settled over the command bridge. Commander Zekthor consulted his instrument panel, his clawed fingers dancing over the controls. "Admiral, we've completed our scan of the Mars orbital zone. The humans have a few small research stations on the planet's surface and several tiny satellites in orbit. Nothing that could pose any threat to our forces." "What about defensive positions?" Torval asked, though. He suspected he knew the answer. "None detected, sir. No hidden weapons platforms, no concealed military bases, no defense grids of any kind. If the humans have a plan to stop us, they're not showing it." Lieutenant Vashka looked up from her sensor station with a puzzled expression. "Admiral, this is highly unusual. Most species at least attempt to mount some kind of defense when they see our fleet approaching. Even the weakest civilizations we've encountered tried to hide their military assets or set up ambush points." The Admiral nodded grimly. In his experience, there were only 2 reasons for such complete silence. Either the enemy was already so terrified they had given up all hope of resistance, or they were supremely confident in whatever trap they had prepared. Given how the humans had detected his cloaked ship so easily, Torval was beginning to suspect the latter. As the hours passed and the fleet pushed deeper into the system, they encountered the asteroid belt that lay between Mars and the giant planet Jupiter. Here finally they found signs of human activity. Dozens of mining stations dotted the space between the floating rocks, their lights twinkling like stars against the darkness. "Interesting," muttered Captain Mordek as he studied the sensor readings. "The humans have been quite busy out here. These mining operations are much larger than we initially thought." Torval moved to look over the captain's shoulder. The display showed a complex network of human installations scattered throughout the asteroid field. Mining ships moved between the rocks like busy insects, while processing stations refined raw materials into usable resources. But something else caught his attention. "What are those energy readings?" Mordek frowned at his instruments. "That's what's puzzling me, Admiral. We're detecting unusual energy signatures from several of the mining stations. The power levels are much higher than what should be needed for simple rock processing." "Could they be weapons?" Zekthor asked, moving closer to examine the data. "That's just it," Mordek replied with frustration clear in his voice. "Our detailed scans can't penetrate whatever shielding they're using. From the outside they look like perfectly normal mining equipment, but the energy readings suggest something much more sophisticated." Torval felt that familiar itch between his shoulder blades that had kept him alive through dozens of campaigns. His instincts were screaming that something was very wrong here, but he couldn't identify exactly what it was. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships are to assume battle formation immediately. Weapons charged, shields at maximum power. Whatever. The humans are planning. I want us ready for it." As his ships spread out into their attack positions, Torval couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than it appeared. The pale surface of Earth's moon filled the main screen as Admiral Torval's fleet reached what should have been the final stage of their approach. The Vorthak commander felt a mixture of anticipation and unease as he prepared to give the order for planetary bombardment. In just a few more hours, this would all be over, and Earth would become another conquered world in the Empire's vast collection. But then the universe seemed to flicker. It started as a barely noticeable shimmer in space, like heat waves rising from hot pavement on a summer day. At first, the Vorthak officers thought it was some kind of sensor malfunction, or perhaps interference from the nearby planet's magnetic field, but the shimmer grew stronger, spreading across their entire field of vision like ripples on the surface of a pond. Lieutenant Vashka was the first to notice something was seriously wrong. Her voice came out as a strangled whisper as she stared at her instrument panel. "Admiral, you need to see this. The sensor readings are going completely insane." Torval rushed to her station just as the shimmering effect reached its peak. Then, as if someone had flipped a cosmic light switch, the illusion fell away to reveal the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. Where moments before there had been empty space and a few small human installations, now there were structures, so massive they defied comprehension. The asteroid belt, which they had thought was simply a collection of mining stations, revealed itself to be something far more terrifying. Every single asteroid had been hollowed out and converted into a weapons platform, their surfaces bristling with devices that pulsed with barely contained energy. But that was just the beginning. Jupiter, the massive gas giant that had seemed like a harmless background decoration, now showed its true nature. Its 4 largest moons glowed with an eerie blue light that made every Vorthak on the bridge instinctively step backward. The energy readings from those moons were beyond anything. In their experience, power levels that could crack planets in half. "By the void," Commander Zekthor breathed, his usual confidence completely shattered. "What are we looking at?" The answer came from Captain Mordek, whose voice shook as he read from his instruments. "Admiral, those aren't natural moons anymore. The humans they've turned them into some kind of antimatter reactors. The energy signature is unlike anything we've ever encountered, but the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As their sensors adjusted to the new reality, they detected similar modifications throughout the entire solar system. Mars had weapons, embedded deep beneath its surface. The sun itself seemed to be surrounded by a network of devices that defied explanation. Even tiny Pluto, at the very edge of the system, glowed with ominous purpose. Torvald staggered backward as the full scope of what he was seeing became clear. The humans hadn't built a fleet to defend their world. They had done something far more ambitious and terrifying. They had converted their entire star system into a single massive fortress. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid had been transformed into a component of an unimaginably powerful defense network. It was engineering on a scale that should have been impossible, requiring technology and resources that made the Vorthak Empire look like children playing with toys. The communications array crackled to life, and Admiral Kim's calm voice filled the silent bridge. There was no anger in his tone, no triumph, just a quiet statement of fact that chilled every alien heart. You were warned. As those three simple words echoed through the command center, every Vorthak officer finally understood the terrible truth. They hadn't come to conquer a primitive species. They had stumbled into the territory of something far beyond their understanding, something that had been patiently waiting for them to make exactly this mistake. From behind Earth's pale moon, a single craft emerged into the void of space. It was nothing like what the Vorthak had expected from human technology. Where their intelligence reports had described primitive rockets and bulky space stations, this vessel moved with an elegance that seemed to mock the laws of physics itself. The ship was small, perhaps only 50 meters in length, with a design so smooth and seamless it looked like it had been carved from a single piece of metal. No visible engines, no obvious weapons, no external features that made any sense to the alien observers. It simply glided forward through space, as if the vacuum itself was pushing it along. Admiral Torvald stared at the approaching vessel with a mixture of confusion and growing dread. What is that thing? How is it moving without any propulsion system we can detect? Before anyone could answer, the small craft opened a communication channel. A human voice, calm and professional, filled the bridge of the Crimson Talon. There's Commander Park Minho of the Earth Defense Corps. I'm approaching your flagship for a brief demonstration. Please do not be alarmed. Commander Zekthor snarled with rage at what he saw as mockery. Admiral, one small ship thinks it can threaten our entire fleet? Let me show these humans what real weapons can do. Without waiting for orders, Zekthor activated the targeting systems. The Crimson Talon's main plasma cannons, weapons capable of melting asteroids, swiveled toward the approaching human vessel. Energy readings spiked as the massive guns charged to full power. Fire, Zekthor roared. Brilliant streams of superheated plasma erupted from the Vorthak flagship, enough destructive force to vaporize a city. The other ships in the fleet joined the attack, filling space with a light show of deadly energy that should have reduced any vessel to glowing particles. But something impossible happened. The plasma beams, traveling at nearly the speed of light, simply curved away from the human ship. Not deflected by shields or absorbed by armor, but bent around the vessel as if space itself was protecting it. The deadly energy streams twisted through impossible angles before dissipating harmlessly into the void. Lieutenant Vashka's instruments went wild as she tried to understand what she was seeing. Admiral, this is not possible. Energy doesn't behave this way. It's as if the ship is warping the fabric of space-time around itself. The human craft continued its approach, completely unaffected by the devastating barrage. As it drew closer, Admiral Torvald could make out more details through the viewing ports. Inside the ship's transparent cockpit, he could see a single human figure piloted the vessel with casual ease, as if flying through a storm of plasma fire was just another routine day at work. "Cease fire," Torvald ordered, though his weapons were already proving useless. "All ships, cease fire immediately." Commander Park's voice came over the communications again, still maddeningly calm. "Thank you for the demonstration of your weapons capabilities. Now, if you'll permit me, I'd like to show you something in return." The human ship moved closer to the massive Vorthak flagship, and then something extraordinary happened. A docking tube extended from the small craft toward the Crimson Talon's hull. But this wasn't a normal docking procedure that required matching airlocks. and careful maneuvering. Instead, the space around both ships began to bend and twist. Admiral Torval watched in growing horror as his own ship's hull started to warp, the metal flowing like liquid to accommodate the human vessel's docking tube. The gravitational forces required to manipulate matter in such a way should have torn both ships apart, yet somehow everything remained perfectly stable. "By the void," Captain Mordek whispered, his voice barely audible. "They're not trying to destroy us, they're treating this like some kind of lesson." As the docking connection completed itself with impossible ease, Torval finally understood the terrifying truth. The humans weren't engaged in a battle with his fleet. To them, this was simply a classroom demonstration, a teaching moment to show exactly how outmatched the Vorthak really were. The sound of footsteps in the docking tube announced that class was about to begin. The airlock hissed open with a sound. That seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence of the Vorthak command bridge. Every alien eye focused on the opening as a figure in a simple white spacesuit stepped through. The human was smaller than most of the reptilian warriors surrounding her, appearing almost fragile in comparison to their armored scales and razor-sharp claws. But appearances, as the Vorthak were learning, could be devastatingly deceiving. "TQ." Human reached up and began removing her helmet with casual movements, as if she were simply taking off a hat after a pleasant walk. Admiral Torval and his officers watched in stunned silence, waiting for the inevitable moment when the alien atmosphere would kill the intruder. It never came. Lieutenant Lee Somin took a deep breath of the ship's air, designed specifically for reptilian lungs, and smiled as if she were enjoying a fresh spring morning. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and confident, without even a hint of the breathing apparatus that should have been necessary for her survival. "Good afternoon, Admiral Torval. I'm Lieutenant Lee Somin of the Earth Defense Corps. Thank you for accepting our invitation aboard your flagship." The Vorthak commander found his voice with considerable effort. How are you breathing our atmosphere? It should be toxic to your species." Lee's smile widened slightly. "Oh, that's a simple matter of biological adaptation. We've had plenty of time to prepare for this meeting." She gestured casually around the command bridge, taking in the sophisticated alien technology with the air of someone examining antiques in a museum. "We've been monitoring your empire's expansion for 200 years, you see." The words hit the assembled Vorthak like a physical blow. 200 years was longer than most of their individual lifespans, spanning multiple generations of their civilization. Commander Zekthor's voice came out as a strangled hiss. "Impossible. 2 centuries ago, your species had barely achieved basic spaceflight." "That's what we wanted you to think," Lee replied, with the patience of a teacher explaining a simple concept to confuse students. "You see, Admiral, your empire has a very predictable pattern. You scout a system, analyze the local species' technology level, and then make your conquest plans based on what appears to be their current capabilities." She began walking slowly around the command center, her movements so relaxed that several Vorthak officers instinctively stepped back. "The problem with that approach is that it assumes your targets aren't aware of your existence. We detected your expansion into the Kepler sector in 1823 by your calendar. We watched you destroy the Altarian colonies. We observed your conquest of the Rigel mining worlds. We studied every battle, analyzed every technique, learned from every victory you achieved." Lieutenant Vashka's voice was barely a whisper. "You've been watching us for 200 years. Watching, learning, and preparing," Lee confirmed. "You have to understand, Admiral, that humans have a particular talent that seems to be rare in the galaxy. When we encounter a problem that might kill us, we don't just try to build bigger weapons or thicker armor. We step back and ask ourselves a fundamental question. What if we're approaching this completely wrong?" She paused near the main viewing screen, where the image of Earth hung like a blue jewel against the stars. "Your empire conquers through superior firepower and advanced technology. Very straightforward, very effective against most species. But what if your next target decided not to compete with you on those terms? What if they chose to master something far more fundamental?" Captain Mordek found his voice, though it shook with disbelief. "What could be more fundamental than advanced technology?" Lee turned to face him, and for the first time there was something in her expression that made every Vorthak in the room feel like prey animals being studied by a predator. The forces that govern reality itself, Captain. Gravity, time, space. The fundamental constants that determine how the universe operates. She gestured toward the view screen showing the human solar system. You build ships that can travel faster than light. We learn to fold space so that distance becomes meaningless. You create weapons that can destroy planets. We discovered how to manipulate the strong nuclear force that holds atoms together. You developed advanced materials and energy shields. We mastered the ability to alter the basic properties of matter itself. The silence that followed was absolute. Every Vorthak on the bridge stared at the small human figure with a mixture of terror and incomprehension. What she was describing wasn't just advanced technology. It was godlike power over the fundamental building blocks of existence. Lee's voice remained calm and conversational as she delivered the final revelation that would haunt their nightmares forever. Welcome to Earth's solar system, Admiral. Class is now in session. Lieutenant Lee stood calmly in the center of the alien command bridge, her presence somehow making the massive Vorthak warriors around her seem small and insignificant. The reptilian officers shifted nervously, their earlier confidence completely shattered by the revelations of the past few minutes. Admiral Torval found himself wondering how he had ever thought his empire could threaten these humans. "Now then," Lee said, her voice carrying the tone of someone conducting a routine business meeting, "we need to discuss your options going forward. As I see it, you have two choices available to you." She held up one finger. Option 1. You immediately order your entire fleet to withdraw from our solar system. You return to your empire, mark our space as permanently off-limits, and ensure that no Vorthak vessel ever approaches Earth again. In return, we allow you and your crews to leave here alive and unharmed. The human paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. Option 2. You refuse to leave, either because you don't believe what you've seen or because your pride won't allow you to retreat. In that case, we will demonstrate exactly why the first option is the only sensible choice. Commander Zekthor, still clinging to his warrior instincts despite everything he had witnessed, snarled with desperate bravado. You expect us to flee? From threats and parlor tricks? The Vorthak Empire has never retreated from any battle. Lee turned toward him with an expression that might have been pity. Commander, what you've seen so far aren't threats or tricks. They're just basic demonstrations of our current capabilities. But if you truly require a more convincing display— She moved to the large viewing screen that dominated the command bridge, her movement so casual that she might have been walking through her own home. Admiral, do you see that star system approximately 47 light-years from your current position? The one with the bright blue-white star? Torval followed her gaze to a point of light barely visible among the countless stars scattered across the void. Yes, I can see it. That system contains 6 planets, none of which support life as we understand it. It's been abandoned for millions of years, making it perfect for what I'm about to show you. Lee raised her hand toward the distant star, her fingers making a simple gesture, as if she were turning off a light switch in a room. For a moment, nothing happened. The star continued to shine with the same steady brilliance it had maintained for billions of years. Then, without any warning or gradual dimming, it simply stopped existing as a source of light. The star didn't explode in a brilliant supernova that would have been visible across the galaxy. It didn't collapse into a black hole or expand into a red giant. It just went dark, as if someone had reached across 47 light-years of space and flipped a switch. Lieutenant Vashka's instruments went completely insane as they tried to process what they were detecting. "Admiral," she whispered, her voice filled with absolute terror. "The gravitational waves are just reaching us now. The star is not destroyed. It's still there, but it's not producing any energy. It's as if nuclear fusion just stopped working." The implications hit every Vorthak on the bridge at the same time. Humans hadn't just built better weapons or more advanced ships. They had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces that powered stars themselves. They could reach across impossible distances and simply turn off the nuclear reactions that had been burning for eons. Captain Mordek staggered backward, his legs barely able to support him. By the void. You turned off a star. You just turned it off like it was a lamp in your quarters. Lee nodded with the same casual air she had maintained throughout the entire encounter. Nuclear fusion is really just a matter of manipulating the strong nuclear force under specific conditions. Once you understand the underlying physics, controlling it becomes relatively straightforward. She turned back to Admiral Torval, whose reptilian features had gone pale with shock. So, Admiral, have you made your decision? Option 1 involves all of you leaving our system immediately and never returning. Option 2, she glanced meaningfully at the viewing screen, where the dead star system served as a permanent reminder of human capabilities. Option 2 involves us having this same conversation with whoever your empire sends, to investigate why your fleet never came home. The choice, as she had promised, was remarkably simple. Admiral Torval stood frozen on his command bridge, staring at the view screen, where a star that had burned for billions of years now sat cold and lifeless. The extinguished sun was a message written across the cosmos, in a language that even the most stubborn warrior could understand. His empire's mighty fleet, which had seemed so powerful just hours ago, now felt like a collection of toys floating helplessly in the darkness. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Around him, his officers waited for orders, their earlier confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. These were veterans of countless campaigns, hardened, warriors who had faced death many times without flinching. But what they had witnessed today wasn't just death. It was proof that they were dealing with beings who could rewrite the fundamental rules of existence itself. "Admiral," Commander Zekthor finally whispered, his voice barely audible. "What are your orders?" Torval closed his eyes and felt something die inside him. It wasn't fear. He had conquered fear long ago during his rise through the military ranks. It was the death of certainty, the collapse of everything he had believed about his place in the universe. For his entire adult life, he had been the predator, the one who inspired terror in others. Now he understood what it felt like to be prey. When he opened his eyes again, his voice was steady but hollow. "Signal all ships. Immediate withdrawal from this system. Maximum speed, no delays, no regrouping formations. We leave now." Lieutenant Vashka's claws trembled as she transmitted the retreat order across the fleet. Within minutes, 8,000 Vorthak warships began turning away from Earth, their engines screaming to life as they fled toward the edge of the solar system. Ships that had approached in perfect military formation now scattered like startled fish, each captain desperate to put distance between himself and the impossible humans. But as the fleet retreated, the Vorthak discovered that their ordeal was far from over. Strange ships began appearing around them as they fled. These weren't the crude chemical rockets their intelligence had described, nor were they conventional spacecraft of any design the aliens recognized. They were vessels that seemed to mock every law of physics the Vorthak understood. Some of the human ships simply materialized out of empty space, appearing instantly without any transition or movement. Others flickered in and out of existence, there one moment and gone the next, as if they were stepping between different layers of reality. A few seemed to be moving faster than light itself, but without entering hyperspace or using any form of propulsion that registered on Vorthak sensors. Most disturbing of all were the ships that appeared to exist in multiple places at once. Captain Mordek, commanding one of the escort vessels, reported seeing the same human craft simultaneously above, below, and beside his ship, all at the exact same moment. When he tried to target one of the duplicates, his weapon systems simply refused to lock on, as if they couldn't decide which version was real. "Admiral," came a frantic transmission from the outer edge of the retreating fleet. "We're detecting human vessels that appear to be moving through what looks like folded space. They're covering distances that should take hours in mere seconds, and they're not using any technology we can identify." Another captain's voice crackled over the communications. "Sir, one of their ships just passed through our hull without causing any damage. It was there inside our ship, and then it was gone. Our sensors can't even explain what happened." Torval watched the chaos unfolding around his fleeing fleet and finally understood the full scope of his miscalculation. The humans weren't just escorting them out of the system. They were providing one final demonstration of their capabilities. Every impossible maneuver, Every physics-defying display was a gentle reminder of how completely outmatched the Vorthak had been from the very beginning. As his flagship crossed the orbit of Pluto and prepared to enter hyperspace, Torval reflected on Lieutenant Lee's earlier words. She had mentioned that humanity had been monitoring the Vorthak Empire for 200 years, studying their tactics and preparing for this eventual confrontation. Now he realized the terrible truth. The warnings. They had received the polite request to leave human space, the calm diplomacy. None of it had been mercy or weakness. It had been professional courtesy, the same kind of courtesy a teacher might show to students, before demonstrating why they needed to pay attention in class. The humans had been trying to save both species from this confrontation, not because they feared the outcome, but because they already knew exactly how it would end. The news spread through the galaxy like ripples on a pond, carried by frightened Vorthak survivors who could barely comprehend what they had witnessed. At first, other species dismissed their stories as the desperate lies of a defeated empire trying to save face after a humiliating retreat. After all, how could a primitive species that had barely reached its own moon possess technology that could extinguish stars? But as more details emerged, the galactic community began to take notice. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium, masters of interstellar commerce, had been quietly preparing their own invasion fleet to claim Earth's abundant natural resources. Their scouts had confirmed the same intelligence that had fooled the Vorthak. Primitive, rockets, basic orbital stations, and a species that seemed ripe for conquest. When Admiral Keshatar heard the rumors from the Vorthak retreat, he laughed with his officers and continued preparations for what they expected to be an easy victory. That laughter died when their long-range sensors detected something impossible. The star that the humans had allegedly extinguished was indeed dark, its light completely absent from the cosmic background. More terrifying still, their instruments showed that the star was still physically present. It simply wasn't producing any energy. Nuclear fusion, the process that had powered it for billions of years, had somehow been switched off like a simple machine. Within a single day, the Zephyrian invasion fleet was quietly disbanded and reassigned to other sectors. The story reached the Krillian Empire through different channels. Their military intelligence network had been tracking various conquest opportunities throughout the Outer Rim, and Earth had been marked as a priority target due to its strategic location and apparent defenselessness. But when whispered reports began circulating about human ships that could phase in and out of reality, the Krillian High Command decided to conduct their own investigation. They sent a single stealth probe to observe the human solar system from a safe distance. The probe's mission was simple: confirm or deny the wild stories coming from Vorthak space. What it discovered sent shockwaves through every military planning room in the Krillian Empire. The humans weren't hiding their capabilities anymore. Their entire star system pulsed with energy signatures that defied explanation. Planets had been converted into weapons platforms, moons glowed with contained antimatter, and the space between worlds was filled with devices that bent light and gravity in ways that should have been impossible. Most disturbing of all, the probe detected human vessels moving through what appeared to be folded space-time, covering vast distances instantaneously. When the probe tried to retreat, it found itself gently but firmly escorted to the edge of the system by a human ship that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. The message was clear: we see you, we know you're there, and we're allowing you to leave. The Krillian invasion plans were abandoned before they were even finalized. Word spread to every corner of known space through the networks that connected galactic civilization. Traders, explorers, diplomats, and military officials all carried the same whispered warnings. The small blue planet in the Outer Rim wasn't what it appeared to be. The species that seemed weakest was actually something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Other conquest-minded empires quietly removed Earth from their target lists. The hegemony of suns, which had been planning a massive expansion into human space, suddenly discovered urgent business in the opposite direction. The Stellar Brotherhood, known for their aggressive territorial expansion, decided that the Outer Rim sectors weren't worth the investment after all. Earth's solar system became an unofficial forbidden zone, marked not by military might or defensive alliances, but by reputation alone. No government issued formal warnings. No treaties were signed. No diplomatic protocols were established. Species simply understood, through a combination of wisdom and survival instinct, that some territories were too dangerous to enter. But humanity didn't retreat into isolation. Their ships, impossible vessels that moved through folded space and existed in multiple dimensions, began appearing at the edges of explored space. Never threatening, never aggressive, but always present. Traders would glimpse them in the distance, scientists would detect their energy signatures on long-range sensors, and explorers would find traces of their passage in uncharted systems. The message was always the same. We are watching, we are aware, and we hope you will be wise enough to listen if we ever need to issue another warning. In cantinas and trading posts across the galaxy, the story of the Vorthak Empire's encounter with Earth became legend. Veterans would speak in hushed tones about the species that had learned to manipulate reality itself, about ships that could exist everywhere and nowhere at once, about humans who had converted their entire star system into a weapon that could reach across the cosmos. And sometimes when young civilizations grew too confident in their military might, or too eager to expand their territories, an elder would remind them of the simple truth that now governed galactic politics. The apex predators of the universe lived on a small blue planet, and they were always watching.